Hey guys, thanks for joining us here at Salty Ginger Talk. If you're a returning listener, it is great to have you back. If you're new to the channel, we're really glad you joined us. Hope you like what you hear. Our podcast is for people that want to learn something new or make themselves a little bit better every day. So in today's episode, we're going to give you some tips on how to spot fake stories. And we think that's terribly important in today's environment because it's so easy with the advent of social media, with the advent of AI, with kind of the breakdown of the confidence that we have in mainstream media outlets like news organizations, like newspapers, who have become very partisan and very loose with their fact checking before they publish stories. And so it's so easy today for something fake to be published or something incorrect to be published. I don't even know if we should be using the word fake. Inaccurate feels better to us. We hear misinformation, we hear disinformation. We think those are very nebulous terms. So what is misinformation? What is disinformation? Who decides what it is? So in our world, there's really two kinds of information. There's fact, which is incontrovertible, and there's opinion, which we think should be based on some type of facts or data or logical inferences from the world that you view. And so nothing wrong with opinion, but it should be called opinion. And there's so many things that get published as fact that simply are not fact. And so what we want to do and what we're encouraging everybody to do is to really inspect the information that you're consuming, especially before you share it as truth to other people. So how'd we get here? This is not new, by the way. This is inaccurate information or lying, whatever you want to call it, has been around from time immemorial. So think back to when tobacco companies published their own studies and said, yeah, there's nothing wrong with tobacco. It doesn't cause cancer. It's not addicting. It's good for your health. Like, all false. They knew it was false. But they published their own studies to try to keep their business going. And that worked for quite a while until the veil got pulled back and they wound up being exposed for what they were doing. So this is not a new phenomenon at all. The government has lied to us multiple times. There's just a lot easier ways to verify things now, and there's a lot different sources for people to get information. So it's a lot harder to control a narrative because there's so many people that can verify and give opinions because of the social media and really the internet more than anything can allow information to be spread very quickly, which is why we say it's so important that you should be accurate or try to be as accurate as you can when you're spreading information or you're sharing information with others. On top of that, there's a lot of people who make their living just getting clicks. And so they create bots, they create troll accounts, they put clickbait items together, and then you've got AI that makes it even easier to do those things. And the way the algorithms work on most social media platforms is they prioritize engagement with a post much more than they ever look at accuracy of the information on the post. So if you create a really good troll story, it's going to spread like wildfire because people engage with it. And that doesn't make it right, doesn't make it accurate. It just means it gets out there quickly, which is one of the biggest problems we have is we're much more aware of all of this inaccurate information out there now because it's so easy to get to so many different people. And so we've just got to be real careful about how we go about it. But why do people fall for this stuff? Why do they think X, Y, or Z, right? Why did people so easily believe that the Hunter Biden laptop that showed up was Russian disinformation, which was clearly false? Why did people believe that Haitian immigrants in Springfield were eating dogs and cats, which was clearly false? There was no evidence of that. We try as best we can to remain impartial. We've never been registered as a Republican, never been registered as a Democrat. We try to be impartial, but everybody has biases and we're no different. We have biases just like anybody else. But we think we do a better job than most of kind of removing ourselves from the emotions, trying to take a step back and assess situations based on the facts that we know. So we've got a partner that says, what do I have to believe for this to happen? What has to be true for this to happen? And that little framework is a great way to think about it. So if you want to lose, let's just use a weight loss thing, right? Lose 30 pounds in 10 days. What do you have to believe to be true to be able to lose 30 pounds in 10 days? Like, you have to defy the laws of physics and thermodynamics to get that done. And it's just not real. But we believe it because we want it to be true. We believe it because we have confirmation bias. We believe it because we let our emotions control our thought process instead of thinking logically and going, well, this sounds like crap. There's no way I can lose 30. Nobody can lose 30 pounds in 10 days. That's just not how weight loss works. And even if you do, it's probably mostly water weight. You can't burn 30 pounds of fat in 10 days. Like, just the math on that says, 30 pounds at 3,500 calories. What's that, 95,000 calories in 10 days? That's crazy. You can't do that. Most of these things work. They play on your emotions. They play on your emotions. They play on your underlying biases. And they want you to believe the false truths that they're peddling. But they tug on either your confirmation bias, your bias towards a type of thought, or your emotions to get that done. So we're going to give you 5 practical tips to use to try to avoid being fooled by by inaccurate information, and to be able to do your own research, your own fact check, your own whatever you want to call it. I know that people love to kind of speak about, I did my own research. That means you're a conspiracy theorist. No, it means you're not an idiot, is what it means. Because we don't take anything at gospel. If you think everything that's on Fox News is the truth, you're kidding yourself. If you think that everything that's on CNN is the truth, you're kidding yourself. If you think everything in the New York Times is the truth, you're kidding yourself. Everything in the Wall Street Journal is the truth, you're kidding yourself. It's just not. It's just not. So how do you verify what you're consuming? How do you verify information in today's day and age? So tip number 1, who published the story? Like, if it's a clearly slanted or biased outlet, they're probably publishing something to get you to think the way they want you to think. Is it a reputable news organization? Even if it is a reputable news organization, does it make sense to you? What they're saying, does it make sense? Do they provide sources? Where are they getting this information from? There's such a dependency now on unnamed sources because so many people want to be first to market with a story. And in today's day and age where you can spread information so efficiently across the internet, gone are the days of getting 2 or 3 documented sources and being certain about a story before you publish it. Now it's way more important to be first than it is to be right. And so we've all got to be very cognizant of that. If you're on the internet, check the website. A lot of people set up like spoof websites. For example, abcnews.co instead of abcnews.com. And abcnews.co could be spouting all sorts of crazy stuff, knowing that they've got a lot of people on the site who think they're on abcnews.com and will believe whatever they put on that site. So that's tip number 1. Check the source. Who is providing this information? And if you know what their biases are, you can have a pretty good idea that they're trying to push you towards their own biases or their way of thought. So that's 1. Tip number 2, verify with multiple sources. If it's a legitimate story, multiple credible sources are going to be reporting on it. That's true in most every instance. There are times when Fox News ignores a story because it goes against their narrative and they don't want their listeners to hear it, but it's being reported in lots of other places. Or there are times when CNN or MSNBC won't report a story because it goes against their narrative and they don't want their listeners to hear it, but it's being reported in a lot of other places. So if a story's legitimate, think about COVID. COVID was real. It was everywhere. Leave all the conversation about whether the reaction and the lockdowns, all that stuff was good or not. Forget all that. COVID was a real virus that spread across the world very quickly and impacted millions of people in very negative ways. And everybody was reporting on it because it was legitimate. You should be skeptical when you only see this information in 1 or 2 spots. Doesn't mean it's necessarily false, but it's a pretty good idea. It gives you a pretty good idea that you might need to do some more digging before you take it at gospel. So, tip 3, watch for emotional manipulation. Like we talked about earlier on our weight loss pitch. Fake news or disinformation, whatever we're calling it, often plays on strong emotions, anger, fear, excitement. When they think they can pull on those levers within you, they're much more willing and able to kind of slant a perspective or slant even legitimate facts, twist them or present them in a way that make you think about things the way they want you to think about things. So if a headline makes you feel a strong reaction, take a step back and verify it before you share it. That's just one tip. If it gives you, if it's written to elicit an emotional response, you got to stop right there and say, hey, I got to be eyes wide open as I consume this information, because I might not be getting the full story here. Similarly, sensational or exaggerated language is a red flag. You won't believe what happened next. I can't believe he said this. It's beyond the pale that blah, whatever that is. That's certainly an opinion piece, right? Because they are trying to get you, they're trying to elicit an emotional response from the words that they are using. They're not just reporting the facts. And anyone that's trying to be a reputable news organization will report the facts. There's places for opinions. There's places for editorials, but they should be clearly labeled as opinion piece or an editorial piece. If they're presenting it as a news story, it should just present the facts. Those strong words that elicit emotions have no place in a news story, an actual news story. So that's tip number 3. Watch for an emotional manipulation. Tip number 4, inspect the evidence itself. Does the article or the online post or whatever, does it cite credible sources? Does it cite experts? And look, experts is a strong word. We hear a lot of people that blindly follow we should listen to doctors. Look, math will tell you that half the doctors that exist are below average. That's just the math. I said that to a couple of my sisters one time, and they were just incredulous. How can you say that? I was like, that's not a controversial statement. It's math. If 100 doctors exist, the average is 50. Anyone below 50 is below average. They just are. That's math. And so that doesn't mean they're bad doctors. It doesn't make them wrong on any particular subject. It just means they're below average. But you need to think about that before you just blindly follow an expert, because experts are wrong a lot. It just is the truth. And is there data? Look for data. Look for things that you can verify with your own eyes. Do the math yourself. That's how when COVID first came out and they were talking about the death rate with COVID, we knew that it was bullshit because they had modeled it. And you can make a model say anything you want. If you make the inputs to the model worst case scenario, the model is going to spit out the worst case scenario. If you put in best case scenario, the model is going to spit out the best case scenario. The truth of the matter is nobody has a crystal ball and can predict exactly what's going to happen. So was it smart to be cautious? Sure. Where we went wrong, in our opinion, was we stopped using data early on and we let fear drive our decisions. Because very early on, they recognized that young, healthy people really weren't at much risk. That people that didn't have existing comorbidities or pre-existing conditions weren't at great risk. And older people or people with comorbidities were at much higher risk. And that's the segment of the population we should have been targeting and keeping safe. But we didn't do those things. We just kind of did one broad approach across society because we didn't use facts. And that's what we want. Inspect the evidence. Show us the facts so we can make a good decisions. Also look at the images. Are the images manipulated or are they taken out of context? There were several stories in COVID that showed in New York, there was an uptick of COVID, but they showed pictures of an emergency room in Italy, right? So that's someone trying to manipulate how you think or feel about a topic by twisting the facts straight up. And then, like we talked about earlier, you always want to be wary of stories that rely on anonymous sources with no corroboration whatsoever. So, the anonymous sources are the ones that broke Watergate. So there is a place for anonymous sources. But if you ever go back and look at what Woodward and Bernstein did, they did a ton of digging and verification on the information they were provided before they ever went public with it. In today's day and age, like we talked about earlier, more important to be first than it is to be right. And a lot of that kind of academic rigor that existed previously in journalism doesn't exist today. And it's hard to fault them when you think about it from a business perspective, because if you don't have people watching your channel or you don't have people reading your stories, you got a business. So got it. Understand why it's important to be first, but we think it's also important to be right. And sometimes being right means you got to wait a little bit to verify or corroborate your information. So, and then tip number 5, be very wary of social media virality. Just because something gets shared a whole bunch or is popping up everywhere doesn't make it true, right? It was, we found it kind of amusing, the whole conversation around Haitian immigrants eating pets. Like, it just was so crazy that we found it amusing, right? Wrong or indifferent, that's just the truth. But with all that said, anyone could have looked and said, okay, so show me the collar of Fido or Rusty that is no longer around because he was barbecued last night by a Haitian immigrant. Like, that just didn't exist. There was no corroborating evidence. You know, we know J.D. Vance was still a senator in Ohio at the time, and he said his office got calls, but we were never provided any detail behind those calls. There was never any validation of those statements. And that story quickly died off because I think most people thought, hey, this is crazy. It's pretty funny. And then everybody said, well, there's really no proof of this, so we're going to move on. So, you know, you got to check. You got to just kind of put a pause on when things go viral. Hey, that's funny, but is it true? Like, there's nothing wrong with being entertained by that, but spreading it as the gospel and spreading it as real information, that can be harmful, and we don't want to participate in that. Remember, the stuff you want to hear spreads much faster than the truth in many instances. So just because it goes viral, it could very well be going viral simply because it's not true. And so you got to be very cognizant of that. Last thing on that is checks timestamps, updates. When did this actually happen? We've seen lots of stories that have been recycled or regurgitated. Something happened 4 months ago, and then person X is back in the news. And so the story that happened 4 months ago gets regurgitated as if it just happened. And it's old news that we all are already talked through. So the whole point of this is to encourage critical thinking and fact checking before sharing content. You want to be sure that, or pretty sure, what you're sharing is true. And if you're not, just say so. Say, hey, I don't know if this is true or not. I say that a lot. I'll tell my wife something. I haven't had any chance to verify this, but this is what I heard. She'll verify it. She'll look into it. I'll say it to whoever I'm sharing information with. If I'm not certain that I'm sharing the truth, then I'll couch it. I'll just say, I'm not sure if this is true or not. I've had no chance to check it. But what I was told or what I read or what I heard is X. And then you got to be smart about digital literacy. Where are you getting your information from? If you're on random obscure websites, you're probably getting fed a load of shit. If you're on mainstream media and exclusively mainstream media, you're probably getting fed a healthy amount of shit. There's truth somewhere in there, but they are slanting and spinning those things both to the left and to the right to push their narrative and to make people think or feel a certain way. And then you just want to be responsible. That's the way we think about it. You want to be credible so that if someone hears something from you, they can have confidence that you either know it's true or you told them you weren't sure if it was true. And that's the way you kind of want to approach it. So those are our tips for the day, guys. We think it's terribly important to be able to verify information before you start sharing it and calling it the gospel or the absolute truth. So we would challenge you the next time you see something that's suspect, just take a beat, stop, verify it, try to do some fact checking on it and see if it holds up or not. Maybe it does. Maybe it doesn't. But you can feel much better about passing that information along or sharing it if you take the time to do a little bit of that upfront work. Love to hear from you on your experiences. Have you made a bad decision based on fake information or false information? Have you caught false information or helped somebody else with false information? You know, I have elderly relatives and they'll call me sometimes and say, oh, I got this email from PayPal. I'm like, delete it. PayPal doesn't send you emails like that. It's a scam. Get rid of it. So we should be helping folks out that are less digitally literate than us to kind of see through some of this stuff and help educate them on how to navigate today's environment. Because it can be confusing for some folks. So that's it, guys. That's the whole episode for today. Really appreciate Really appreciate you checking it out. James puts it up over here every day. We've got a website, saltygingertalk.com. All of our podcast episodes are available there. We've got links to all of our social media accounts there. And we publish a newsletter every weekday that you can subscribe to on our website. It's a quick 5-minute read in the morning. We're sarcastic. We try to be a little funny and provide both entertainment and news through the newsletter. So might be a good way for you to start your day and get a little information before you hit the streets. Also, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe to our channel on whatever platform you consume it on. Super helpful for us if you're able to do that. So really appreciate you taking the time, guys. Hope you found this information helpful. Be smart about what you're reading. Do your research. Double check things before you spread them as gospel. And I think you'll be a lot better off. Everybody have a great week. Appreciate you checking out the channel. We'll see you on the next episode.